This is a book review of Surrounded by Liars by Thomas Erikson. This book is based on the same disc model as Surrounded by Idiots, which was the first book in the series, and that one gained huge popularity and success internationally. It has been used by many organisations in many different countries to help people better understand their own personalities and thus help them to improve their interpersonal skills and their ability to get on better with other people, especially those who have a very different personality from their own. But this book is much more focused on lying, on half-truths, on bias, on hidden agenda, and it gives the reader a number of tools that one can use to recognise when someone might not be telling the complete truth, and to help the reader develop important critical thinking skills and an ability to filter out what's true and what isn't. In an age of social media where we're constantly bombarded with information, this skill, critical thinking, is perhaps only going to be more important in the future. This book helps the reader to understand why the 4 different types of personality are likely to lie and how they're affected by lies. So if you remember, we have red people who can be highly domineering, ambitious, they're task-oriented extroverts, they don't have time to chat, they want to get the job done, and they don't care what they have to do in order to get it done. There are yellow people who are much more social, they like to talk and chat with other people, they tend to be more optimistic, more friendly, and they are people-oriented extroverts. Then there are green people who tend to be more conservative, they are reliable, they are people-oriented introverts, they don't like conflicts or disagreements, they don't like change, they are stable and steady and can be relied on to they can just be relied on. And then we have blue people who are task-oriented introverts. They tend to prefer their own company. They are very happy sat quietly in the corner, engaged in a task, looking at the fine details and the small print of a particular activity, and are more likely to have analysed inside out a particular task or object, and can be much more objective in how they see the world. They also tend to be quite slow in the way they work and in excess. The author of this book wrote Surrounded by Vampires, and one of the dangers of a blue is that in excess their personality can become perfectionist and they can never really get anything done because they simply take too long worrying about the tiniest of the tiniest details. And there is a potential conflict between them and the Reds, who, for them, everything is about speed. For the Reds, they just want to get things done, and there's potential conflict between Reds and Blues. Surrounded by Vampires, incidentally, I would say is a much better book than this one. Found Surrounded by Vampires to be much more informative, much more deep, much more interesting to read, the different stories and the different angles and how it can apply to everyday life. This one, the author does talk about why the different personality types might not always be completely honest. So in the case of Greens, for example, because they dislike conflicts, they might omit certain information, or they might lie or tell a half-truth if if there's a potential for conflict to occur as a result of telling the truth. A red might lie because they are very much ends justifies the means type of personality. They want to get something done and they don't really care about who gets upset in the process or who loses as a result. They simply have an objective and will do anything to, see that it gets done. So they can lie in order to see a particular task finished. A blue might lie because they want to protect and preserve their reputation for being an expert, for being someone who can be depended on to have full knowledge and understanding of a particular operation. And then yellows can lie partly because they have a much more romantic way of seeing the world, and they're much more prone to fantasy and of elaborating on a particular experience in a poetical or metaphorical, descriptive way, where the facts don't always bind them. They quite like entertaining fiction and talking about their feelings and their emotions rather than the hard objective reality. So he goes into this in this book, the 4 different personality types, and many people are not just one colour. So it's quite rare to have someone who is completely red, completely yellow, completely blue, or completely green. Most people are a mix of 2 colours, and some people are, 3 colours combined. And people can be different in different circumstances and environments, so they can be more yellow in a particular environment than they are at home. When they get home, they might love to be by themselves, just quietly reading and not wanting to engage socially with anyone. So people can almost be chameleon-like, depending on the environment. They can change their colours. But I think there definitely is something to the DISC model in that there are innate characteristics and attributes, a default mode, if you will, which is largely fixed, but can be adapted and changed somewhat depending on the environment. So really love the series as a whole. I thought Surrounded by Idiots and Surrounded Vampires, 2 books very much worth reading. This one less so, because I have to say much of the book seemed to be quite basic, quite common sense. Would have been better, I think, if he offered more stories, more anecdotes, and really went into more detail about the different colours and why they might behave in particular ways, why they might be dishonest in some environments. He doesn't really seem to spend too much time in this book looking at colour-specific forms of deception, and that would have been really useful for him to go into. But nonetheless, it is a good book, and if you're interested in improving your critical thinking skills and your ability to be a more objective, analytical, fact-based perceiver and decision maker, then this might be a book worth checking out. Thank you very much.